Okay, everybody. So fast forwarding on to kind of the next stage of life. We had the option of moving to either Germany or the UK. Of course, we chose the UK. It's not like at my age I could say, nope, we're going to Germany. So I kind of had to kind of follow suit. But we moved into the UK. My my mother had a great level of English, let's say, and I had zero. I think I could say hello in the most broken, stereotypical Europe or Eastern European accent of hello you can ever think. That was me. But the advantage that I had is I moved from Ukraine to where I was old enough to learn fluently the Russian language and the Ukrainian language in every sense, so read, write, speak. And I was young enough to have moved into the UK to where my mind wasn't fully set yet. So, for example, an adult, imagine a 35, 40-year-old adult moving to Japan, for them to learn Japanese will be a lot harder than a little tiny child whose brain is, kind of very absorbent. So I was in my twilight zone, let's say, or the Goldilocks years, as they call it. So I moved to the UK, I knew no English. I was immediately after about 4 weeks, of course, kind of paperwork and stuff like that. I was thrust into primary school. So I did year six and then I moved on to kind of secondary education. But as soon as I got forced into the British educational system, as you can imagine, I had no English behind me. In the 4 weeks or the 6 weeks or whatever it was that I was at home with my mother, we went through an intensive kind of an immersion course into the British kind of language and culture. So I did try and read in the alphabet, the kind of the typical things you would kind of do if you were learning a new language. So by the time I hit school, I knew instead of one word, I knew 7 words. But the good thing is my entire family refused to speak to me in the home language in school, of course, all the speakers English. So I remember this vividly that um, I had migraines for weeks on end, and I honestly, I kid you not, um, it was probably the most awful pain, a constant pain that you could ever feel. Just imagine a dull pain in your head 24/7. Now, if you're unsure why this was caused, my brain was being literally rewired. For anybody, who watches this channel, if you've moved to another country, a completely foreign, phonetic alphabet, your TH is a th and the PH is a f, imagine all these things, the Russian Ukrainian alphabet is very kind of what you see is what you read. There's very few stipulations, whereas the English alphabet and the English language, if it's come naturally to you, bravo. If it hasn't, a lot of people will kind of have agreed with kind of this thesis that it's one of the hardest to learn because of all the different tenses, stuff like that. So um, I had no choice but to learn English. I could not pick up the phone and ring somebody. I could not speak to my mother because she refused to speak to me in my home language. Of course, now I thank her for this kind of thing. So I went through primary school. I went through secondary school. I ended up going to a an all boys school, very small kind of school, small classes. Our maximum class was of 7, so a lot of attention was kind of given to the pupils rather than your traditional kind of state comprehensive schools in the UK where your classes are anywhere between 25 to 35. In some cases, I've heard it can be a little bit bigger, but our maximum class was of 7. And I think kind of there the beginnings of my education kind of started to get entwined with my language skills. So all through secondary school, ever since I was a child, I was hugely into sports. I was extremely competitive. And when I came over to the UK, my father, he taught me a series of sports. I don't know why them sports, but I really got into rugby, and I got into cricket. Obviously, the rugby element of it. I've always been about 6'6", super thin back then, not like now. Um, so I was big and I was fast. So that was the whole rugby thing. It was an excuse to go and mash some people. And cricket, it was my dad's sport, and um, a traditional English sport, as they say. For all you Americans watching, it's a more exciting version of baseball. And I really, really got into that. So once I got to a certain level of rugby, I kind of stopped it. It was more of here and there kind of game for me. But cricket, I played every summer consistently from probably the age of 14, 15. Now, the reason I mention the sport element is because further on in the story, you'll know exactly why I mentioned sport. But yeah, I was very athletic. I was very competitive in sports. It just happened to be that I was decent at some of the sports, so it made it more fun. Of course, nobody wants to come last in the rain and pretend that you're really having fun, because as a kid, you always want to win. Well, I did anyway. So I went through secondary school. I then moved a little bit closer to home because my school was about 45 minutes from my house. But my sixth form college, so the beginnings of the higher education, was actually in my hometown or city of Durham. Um, so I did my sixth form education there, 2 years for the people who don't know. And I did really well again. I did okay in school. I did, okay in college. I actually had more A levels than kind of necessary, because I decided to a little bit play the game and take a few language A levels, in which I was, of course, fluent in. So I kind of played the system there just to try and get myself a few extra points to go to university, because that was the initial goal: do college and do university. Now, what happened? One of my subjects in college was actually sports education, of course, because of what I've just mentioned. I love sports. I wanted to dive deep into the nutrition element of it, the physicality, and the chemistry of what makes a body tick. And really, in that world, if you know me and you talk to me about sports nutrition or anything like that, I'm a geek about it. So I did sports education as one of my A-level kind of studies, both years, the junior and the senior year of college. And what happened was, this was where I think my life changed a little bit. In the first year of college, my tutor, my professor, he approached me, and they actually said, UK Athletics are doing a program. It was a push pre the 2012 Olympics, and obviously which was in London or in the UK. So UK Athletics did a push called Tall and Talented. He said, I'd like you to go there. So I thought, okay, and so far through my sporting kind of life, I managed to get by just purely on my physicality. I was bigger than normal to normal kids, and I was usually faster than other kids. So he said, why don't you do it? So I thought, why not get some time off college? As anybody when they're 16, 17, 18 kind of thought instantly. So I got ferried down to Loughborough University. If you don't know Loughborough University, it is the main hub, probably within Europe, but certainly in the UK, it is the main university for sport. So um, if you're doing anything in that field, Loughborough is your place. So I went down there, and it was the initial trials, and they did basic tests. 25-meter sprints, you get a weighted ball, how far can you throw it? They had a static bar which was hooked up to a computer in the floor, but basically you're replicating a deadlift, but you're not actually lifting anything. It's actually measuring your force through a computer. So about 20 of those tests. It was actually a 2-day event, and I actually smashed it. As I said, I loved it, sprinting, chucking things, especially the throwing part, because of my kind of cricket obsession. I like throwing balls. I've got very good hand-to-eye coordination. Throwing balls is another kind of trait that I like doing. So throwing weighted balls when I was 17, the big weighted balls, really fun. So I go back and they said, after a few weeks or whatever, they said, actually, the initial thing that I went down for was rowing, because at sixth form, being in Durham, if you know Durham University, in the top 3 prestigious unis in the UK, one of the most prestigious in the world. Of course, a university like that does rowing. I've got big levers, so I was built for rowing, and I actually went down for rowing. I did a little bit of rowing prior to that. I didn't mention it because it was a small phase of my life, and I went there for the rowing element of it. But actually, because of my biometric testing that I did down there, they actually said, well, Mr. Britton, at 17, imagine getting this letter from UK Athletics. They said, would you like to try out for the 2012? Well, obviously, they were going to kind of try and get us there. Would you like to go for the 2012 heavy thrown events? Now, heavy thrown events is discus, it's javelin, and it's hammer throw. So I was like, whoa, you know. So it kind of, the gamble that a teacher took on me really paid off. So I said, yeah, hell yeah, I'll do it. So for the next 6 months, I was up and down, fully paid for by UK Athletics, was to go down to Loughborough, 2 days here, a day there. And that was to really start doing the real testing. We even got to throw the 3 things that I've just mentioned. It's harder than it looks. So when you watch the Olympics next time and you see these big dudes throwing hammer and javelin, you know, they're professional, so it makes it look easy. But it's a lot harder than it seems, especially trying to get it out of the net. I could tell you funny stories all day. So I went down there. I you know, had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that type of thing. You get to meet some of the high performance athletes. If you don't know, Google. But Dwayne Chambers, obviously Olympic sprinter. Kelly Holmes was there. All these type of people in the different roles, whether it be actual athletes, ambassador roles. Like, I got to meet some kind of cool people. So it got obviously 6-7 months down the line, and again, my mental thinking, I think I've made some mistakes in my life, you know. I'll preface this. I think this was one of those mistakes. But basically, when I started doing a bit of research, and you can do your own research as well, but in the athletics game, usually, unless you become, you know, a 1 in a billion kind of superstar on a global level, the main money in athletics is on track. So you're talking sprinters, medium kind of distances, long distances again, but then you're competing with Ethiopians, which again, I'm not 5'2" and weigh 4 stone. So again, it's mainly in the sprinting game. I'm sure you've heard of, you know, Tyson Gay, Usain Bolt, all these type of people. And there's huge money, huge sponsorship money. Now, in the heavy thrown events, the sponsorship money wasn't there. The salary, believe it or not, at the time, I think I heard, you know, the base is anywhere between 30 to 40,000, which sounds okay as a base, but when you are pretty much not subsidized for your food, for your training, your traveling, some of it will be, but especially for the food. And I started to put 2 and 2 together, and I had many aspirations when I was younger, you know, so I thought maybe I can make it here, maybe I can make it there. So I decided to actually say, look, kind of, I'm not interested anymore. Whether that was the mistake of my first phase of kind of young adulthood, I do not know. I maybe think it was, maybe it wasn't, who knows. But in terms of that kind of feature in college, that was probably the highlight of my life at the time. And yeah, I didn't turn it down. I just said I'm not interested. So yeah, I managed to do that for a little bit, which actually was quite fun looking back on it. As I said, I've got stories, and I've got plenty of stories. If I ever have kids, the bedside story kind of department is covered for quite a long time. So college finished. So first year, second year, again, the traditional route. Are you going to go to university? That was the whole plan. And actually, my plan at the time was to go to university and probably do something down the sports nutrition route. I'm quite passionate about that. So I thought, I've got enough, what's it called? ACAS points is basically each A level you get, A, B, C, D, whichever grade you get a certain allocation of points. If you get enough points combined, you get to choose certain universities, let's say. Obviously, the more prestigious Oxford, Cambridge, and Durham unis, you need a ridiculous kind of, entry requirements. But I wasn't going to go anyway, kind of to those unis. I thought I'm actually going to go back to Loughborough because they specialize in the sports department. So, and again, I got my results. Are you going to go to university? And I said, no, I don't see myself at higher education level. I couldn't see myself spending anywhere between 3 to 5 years, depending which course you take, minimum, and 60 to £100,000 worth in debt for something that I didn't know what I wanted to do. As in, do I become, I don't know, at the time, personal trainer? Do I become a teacher? Like at that age, it's quite hard. When parents ask their kids at the age of 12, what do you want to be when you're older? How the hell do they know? I didn't even know when I was 18. So I thought, no, I'm not going to do it. My parents are very highly educated people, and of course they kind of wanted to follow that path of their child, as in you're going to go to higher education and then see where it takes you at the age of 21, 22. But I decided not to. And then what happened between probably the age of 18 to about 2021 is I did what every person at that kind of age. Again, I was a ship without a captain at the point. So of course, I'm a hard worker. I would never not work. So I got myself jobs. I worked in some bars. I worked in some restaurants. I worked some kind of sales jobs, on the retail parks. And looking back on it now, I got to learn a little bit of hospitality. I have got to learn a little bit of retail. I never kind of specialized in one field because I wanted to kind of experience what does working late shifts mean. That's a certain industry. What happens when you work 9 to 5 in a retail sector? So I did the full circle there. And then it got to my kind of point. I think I'll keep this all in one episode. It'll be a lot better rather than having 100 kind of different episodes. And as I started approaching, I remember this. It was my 21st birthday, and of course you have a few big kind of in your first third of life. You have some big monumental kind of birthdays. So 16 is one when you finish school. 18, of course, is the legal age for everything, drinking, alcohol, whatever. So 18 is a big one. And then 21, it's more of an American thing, but 21 is quite a big thing because a lot of people think like you're becoming a young adult at that point. So I actually remember exactly where I was and what I was doing at 21, like on the eve of my birthday. And I sat and I thought, what is it truly that I want to do in life? And I couldn't think of anything apart from this typical, pipe dream of I want to become a professional footballer. I want to win the lottery. I want to become an astronaut, like those things that you need to kind of work up to. So I looked and I thought, do I go and get a career job in something that I will be 60-70% interested, maybe make a career, maybe, climb the corporate ladder somewhere? Or do I go and do something completely kind of off the charts? So far, obviously my life has been a little bit off the charts. I migrated countries. I did a bit of that sporting thing I mentioned. So I wasn't following the traditional path. So at 21, I decided, right, a couple of days after my 21st birthday, I walked into the Joint Armed Forces Career Office. So the reason I said joint is because there's three of the services all in one. So it wasn't a specific service. So there was RAF, Navy, and the British Army. So I thought, I want to become a pilot. So again, completely off the books. I thought, hell, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. So I did a few, again, the biometric tests, and it came back that I am too big to become a pilot. If you've ever seen pilots, I've seen many. We're not the biggest people in the world. I'm talking about military pilots. So I wanted to be a fighter jet pilot. I had the aptitude for it. That's the word. I had the aptitude scores, perfect, no problem. It's just my size as a human being. In a fighter pilot, absolutely no chance. Fixed winged aircraft, again, potentially, but still, very unlikely. So I thought, all right, I can't fly planes. So what is it I want to do? So I looked and I thought, I looked at because I was already on that side of the office anyway. I looked at the RAF regiment. They're a specific regiment designed to protect the Royal Air Force as the kind of the whole deployment anywhere across the world. And then I looked at the Royal Marines, or the infantry in general, but the Royal Marines were first. Now, I've always struggled. I was physically strong. I was fast at short bursts, but my downfall was my fitness. I couldn't run prolonged, mile and a half, 3 mile, 10 mile runs. I couldn't run them without giving myself a cardiac arrest or going very slow. And of course, the Royal Marines, one of the fittest in the world, you needed it to be a little bit of both. So the RAF wasn't for me because I would be too fixed. The Royal Marines, actually, I did 2 fitness tests. One of the tests I failed by about 3 seconds, mile and a half. And I was like, damn, so what is it I do now? But then I started doing more research again. I'm a bit more analytical. So I thought, well, the Navy, I don't want to be really a sailor. I don't want to be on a ship, but the Royal Marines sound like it's a cool thing. So that's why I went for them. And the RAF, Bob being a pilot, I didn't want to be an Air Force medic or an Air Force engineer. That just wasn't my kind of thing. So I looked at the British Army and I thought, actually, there's quite a lot of change. It's the biggest service and it has the biggest number of opportunities as well. So I did the British Army test. Again, the aptitude was great. The aptitude was easy. I went up to Scotland. That was the closest, obviously, that's the Northern Officers. I went up to Scotland to go and do it's called the selection day. It's a 3-day course where they just get you to do run-of-the-mill things to where they, team leading, team kind of coaching. Can you be fit? So we did the mile and a half, which at that point I passed because my dad took over my training, and actually I could have joined the Royal Marines, the RAF, everyone. But I passed the fitness test, and I think this was, again, talking about life choices, where that road splits. I was sat in front of the recruiter. He said, Mr. Britton, congratulations. You have, of course, passed selection. So I thought, yes. And the way selection works is you had to come up, obviously, to your selection office, in my case being Scotland, and you had to have 3 job choices, okay? So my first job choice, well, it's in no particular order, but the first job choice was intelligence corps. So you would do all the sneaky peeky stuff, potentially listening to phone calls, potentially I thought have the route into kind of a secret service, MI5, MI6, anything like that. But I went down as the linguist route, of course. I could speak probably one of the 2 most learned languages in that field in the world. You've got Mandarin, which is obviously a Chinese kind of language, and obviously Russian. If you've watched enough Hollywood films, you know the Chinese and the Russians are public enemy #1. So I thought, well, I'm a fluent speaker. I've still got some family in Ukraine, so why not? So intelligence corps, that was my rationale. I chose Royal Military Police, the military police, because I thought actually I want to be a police officer. That was one of my choices pre going down the military route. I thought, let's go in the police force. But at the time, they had a rejig, and you couldn't join straight from the bat. you have to have some sort of university degree to become a police officer, which makes no sense, because you're not going into a specialist role. And I just had no way of entry. But one of the main ways of entry was if you came from an armed service, especially the military police, of course, because you've done all your training, no one's paying for that. So I thought, right, military police, that was one kind of, well, that was the other option. And option number three, I'm already smiling. It was the infantry. So to be an infantry frontline soldier. And so far, I'm sure you will probably guess which role I went for. So, I live life off the edge. Let's just say that there. So he said, Mr. Britton, well done. You've passed, your selection. And usually they say you can only do one, two, or all three. He said, you're actually available for all three. Which one would you like to do? And I thought, that's an interesting one. It's the first time we had a few options. And again, as a 21-year-old man, I made a very interesting decision of, I said, okay, well, I didn't say this out loud, but I thought in my head, I want to go and shoot some guns, So I chose the infantry. Luckily, I've got all my limbs. I'm not mentally damaged, but that could have ended up kind of really bad for me. So, okay, great. I got back home. My mum was crying. My dad was crying. Happy. Um, Not about the job choice, but the fact that I kind of had a concrete path, if you could call it that. I'm laughing about this now because everything turned out okay, but those stories are coming. So I had to wait a couple of weeks while the selection center kind of allocated my training dates. So all the infantry regiments in the British Army all have the same point of training, which was Catterick, North Yorkshire. Luckily, I lived the county up, County Durham, so actually it wasn't that bad for me. I mean, some people come from London, Scotland, Wales, so I was literally about 35 minutes away. So they said, your basic training starts in 3 weeks. And I was like, holy crap. I thought, wow, this is getting real now. I watched all the documentaries, BBC One documentaries, Sky documentaries. I literally absorbed as much information, and I was training, honestly. I thought, I'm going to get myself so fit. And I mentally thought I was ready. I thought I was literally an Ethiopian runner at the time I turned up to the front gate. So my mum took me down, of course, had my 2 suitcases, and they kind of lead all the parents in, all that type of stuff. And they give the brief saying, don't worry, your son's going to be safe, all that usual kind of political correctness and all that type of stuff, not to scare the parents. And the gate's locked, and they're like, I won't repeat exactly what they said because I will get demonetized, but they basically said, right, we've got you now, type of thing. And I started 6 months of the best and the most intensive infantry training anywhere in the world. They built us up again. They taught us how to, like, believe it or not, I don't know how much you know about it. I mean, to me, it's second nature kind of talking about it, but I do realize some people may not actually know what's involved, but they literally taught us how to do everything. How do you wipe your bum? How do you brush your teeth? How do you shave? Because the British Army, especially the British infantry, is built from, I'd say 75% of the infantry is built from the kind of broken family boys. And I can say that because I did the job and I saw the men that were involved in this. Broken families, maybe the parents kind of had I won't go down into that, but about 75% of the British infantry, or the British Army infantry is built from men like that. Great men, but that's what it's built from. So they don't know which scenario you're coming from. Of course, I've been washing my clothes since I was 15. I started shaving when I was 16, so I knew all of this, but some people have never shaved in their life. So they had to teach right from the start, how do you make your bed? It was funny to me, but you kind of have to do it. So they taught us all the basics within the first probably week. This is how you iron, this is how you do this is how you do that. And then the real training's kind of begun, and it just started to phase us up. I would say, every 2 weeks, the intensity kind of ramped up. You know, the weapons training, the fitness levels. You know, I told you I thought I was the Ethiopian runner. Well, if it took us for the first run, I was right at the back, um, and I got absolutely. I got destroyed. It was the fitness element in Catterick for me was absolutely awful. In fact, they at your pass out parade, and they give you a DVD. There was a videographer following us through the 6 month stage, and they made it into like a 45-minute DVD. And you could see me. I'm going to try and get it. I think my parents have it, but it's still on a CD. I don't have anything that takes bloody CD. But I'm going to try and convert it into like a USB or something. But you could just see me at the back. I've got steam coming out of every orifice in my body, and I just looked in pain. But basically, 6 months, Catterick, I did it. I didn't get back squatted. I didn't do anything. I literally, the people I started with, we started with about, it was 60, no more than 60, split into four kind of sections of men, and we kind of probably passed out with about 21. So a lot of people either left, I'd say 80% of people left in that time. Few got injured, a few got, it's called like a back squat. If there was some serious thing that you failed, like they put you back to the previous phase, which could be like 12 weeks back. So, but luckily I passed out with all the men that we started with, which is actually always cool. I did the passing out parade. You have your really nice kind of stuff, kind of my uniform and, you know, the hat, kind of all that type of good stuff. And the few weeks prior to us kind of passing out, you're basically in chill mode. So I already had my driving license, and they try and put you through. A lot of people actually didn't have a driving license, because for me, I was actually quite an old entrance into the army. I was, 21. A lot of people were 16, 17, didn't drive, didn't do nothing. So I would say 98% of people are actually being put through their driving test, your Cat B license. But because I had mine, unlucky for me, because that follows into the next story, is they said, well, because you've got your driving license, you ain't sitting around doing nothing, so you're going to do your C and C plus E license, which basically means the big trucks and the very, very big trucks, basically the Arctic lorries. So if I ever wanted to leave the army, I can go and drive for Shell and earn a ridiculous amount of money, because I've also got a hazardous material license, which means I can drive kind of fuel, nuclear waste, all that type of stuff. So I passed all my driving tests. Of course, I'd driven for many years previous to this. It was literally, can you drive a truck? You need to take it a bit wider, off you go type of thing. And right before we left, we got given a piece of paper. It's basically your options. So I decided to join this was already decided at the start anyway, but I was joining what's called the Rifles Regiment. It's got 5 battalions. So a battalion, give or take, dependent, is anywhere between 600 or 700 men. So there were 5 of those and 2 reserve battalions. And now battalions all over the place. We've got one in Scotland, one in Wales, one in mainland England, one in Germany, and one in Northern Ireland. So they've kind of covered everywhere they could. And if you didn't know this, serving abroad as a permanent posting gets you a little bit more money. So Germany was the gold standard. If you want to go and earn more money for doing absolutely nothing, I think Germany is giving you between £400 and £500 a month more. And Northern Ireland was slightly less. I think I got about high hundreds or low 200s per month extra. So you don't always get your choice, but they said, give me your number one choice and give me a backup choice if you don't get it. Now, realistically, knowing what I know now, you don't actually, with the state that the military in general is in, you don't get your choice, because they'll just put you where the manpower is required. But some people would put, let's say, 4 rifles is in now in Hampshire, Aldershot, and they would say, John over there would say, I want to go there because I've got my wife and kids. I want to be closer to my mum and dad. All my friends are there. You know, you go to Scotland, that's where I'm potentially thinking of doing something else. So the reasons were vast and they were varied as to why people wanted to go to a certain place. Now, I I put two battalion choices. If you're from the north of England, which I am, usually people would go to it's called Three Rifles. They're in Edinburgh. That's just because of geographical reasons. But I decided to put two, and I was actually going to put the one twice, but they said you can't do that. So I'll put Northern Ireland, and I put, if I don't get it, up in Scotland, because that was just easier for me just to drive up and down from home. But the reason I chose Northern Ireland is, forget the money and the little bit extra 190 quid or whatever it was. I knew, everybody knew at the time, what is the next battalion that is going to go to Afghanistan? And Two Rifles were next in the firing line. They were just about to enter the pre-deployment training. And like I said, I thought, stuff it. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. At the end of the day, that's what I joined for. So I put Two Rifles, and a battalion that goes on tour is always the one that gets, whether you want it, you don't want it, to get all the manpower. So it was my first choice anyway, so I got it without even a blink of an eye. They said, yep, you're going to Northern Ireland. So I passed out in December. It was, of course, national, well, worldwide Christmas holidays anyway. So I managed to get 2.5 weeks off of Christmas. Got to see my mum and dad. They're kind of really upset about, my choice in life at this point, as to why on on godly earth would you want to go into, basically walk into the fire. But ever since I was a child, I've always been allured by that excitement, whether it be monetary excitement, sporting excitement, the danger excitement. I am a weird person. So if I see a safe option, or I see a more difficult, potentially life-threatening, difficult option, let's say, of course I go down this way. So we all went away as a family. My mum crying, my dad was doing the man version of crying, which is not a lot, trying to kind of compose himself. I got um, I got my tickets. Again, you get a few free tickets from the military. Everything. That's the one great thing about the military. Everything is subsidized. I got, I think it was 12 warrants, they're called, but basically 12 tickets, either on plane, train, or ferry. Of course, there's no trains across the water, so it was plane or ferry, basically once a month if you wish. But they paid all my expenses to take the ferry to Northern Ireland. I arrive in a country, if you know the geographical importance of Northern Ireland, Britain, especially the British Army, I arrived in a country that is constant. Our life is constantly in danger. Like literally, the first thing they did is take us to the in-house intelligence officer, or the British Army intelligence officer. He pulled up a map of Northern Ireland. He said, "This is where we are. This is Belfast, which was just to the north of us." He said, "This is a red zone. This is a white zone. If you go into the red zone, they will kidnap you. They will do horrible things, and you will probably never make it out there alive. If anybody tries to lure you in with money, girls, like the honey traps, do not go there." And a few of the guys who have ended up in that position have been heavily fined, because it could have turned into an international incident. Like, just Google the whole Northern Ireland and the army kind of thing. Um, we were allowed to a little bit grow our hair out. I'm not talking about have ponytails, but we just try to blend in a little bit better with the local population, because if you're young, male, high and tight haircut, let's be honest, you may be doing it for fashion, but 99% chance you are an army soldier. So he took us through all the security stuff. Honestly, I freaked out. I was like, oh my God. But I lived pretty much on camp. The only time I left camp was to go to the local Tesco, as to get my food. It's really good because inside, um, you get fed, you have your own accommodation. It's basically like a city within a city. So everything. In fact, we even had our local kind of spa shop inside the camp. So if you didn't really want to leave, you didn't have to. But as you know, all the corner shops in the UK charge 3 times the price. So I went to a supermarket. I arrived there, um, um, and pretty much within 4 weeks, I was chucked in with seasoned soldiers, well, the whole battalion, but of course there were some seasoned and unseasoned people, but seasoned soldiers doing pre-deployment training to go to Afghanistan, and I just passed out of training. You know what I mean? I was thrown into the deep end. So my training or my basic training in Catterick, just they literally took it like this, screwed it up, went like that. They said, right, they've taught you how to um, effectively pass the driving test. We are now going to teach you how to drive, and that's the same analogy over there. They taught me how to pass basic training, and now you get to play with the big boys and the real toys, and we're going to basically train you how to be the best type of thing. And yeah, we went backwards and forwards over the water. We did our counter IED exercises. The most surreal thing is, if you've ever watched Ross Kemp on ITV and stuff, and when he does all his films and when they go to Afghanistan, you've seen that is it the mock village on his program, where we had the same mock village, and they actually had real amputees. Most of them were actually ex-British Army, and they covered them in kind of fake blood, and they had fake explosions going off, so actual real explosions without the kind of the destructive power, let's say, but all the noise and the fanfare was there. Big bang goes off. There's people on the floor with their legs kind of torn off. Honestly, like they mimicked the whole thing so many times, and we had to learn how to stem the bleeding, how to, cover your retreat. And it was, so we started that in January, and then I deployed to Afghanistan July 11th. I don't think I should ever forget that date type of things, but I deployed within probably, in under 6 months. So before I get onto the deployment part, I mentioned again, I dropped a few hints, and I kind of have to keep going backwards and forwards too, because if I explain the whole story, I'll be here for 14 hours. The reason I mentioned about my driving tests is because when we're doing pre-deployment training, of course, that whole consensus went out. Who has got a C and a C plus C license? In this case, the Cat C license was the most important. Of course, stupidly, I put my hand up and said, right, you are off to, I went back to mainland England and went to Hull, and that's where the Royal Logistic Corps would do all the basic training and stuff. But we had a special class put on for us. And basically, I learned how to operate. It was the Foxhound vehicle. Hopefully, I'm going to put the picture up somewhere here now. The Foxhound is a light armored vehicle, or medium light armored vehicle. And I learned how to drive a CAV. Again, another picture should be up right now. Is a CAV, it stands for Civilian Armored Vehicle. So basically, it's usually a Toyota Land Cruiser. Sometimes, if you've got the money, you get a Range Rover. But anything big. And then what they do is they strip the whole vehicle off. They usually put either a V8 or a V12 engine into it. They re-armor the whole thing, the underside, the glass. You've got 4-inch thick bulletproof glass. You've got armor all over, everywhere. So basically, if you roll over an IED or an improvised explosive device, you actually have some sort of chance of keeping your legs or even surviving. So I went over there. It was a 6-week course, and basically it wasn't really theory. It was more driving. So we were doing evasive maneuvers. We were driving arrowhead formation, T-pack formation, doing all of this stuff, looking for IEDs, and it was crazy. Really good fun, actually. So we learned to take, obviously we learned on the Foxhound first. That was the first 3 weeks. The highlight of that training is we took 3 armored vehicles through a McDonald's drive-through. We couldn't fit them through a drive-through, so we had to park them up. I've still got a picture. Hopefully, as I'm talking for this video, hopefully I found it somewhere on my phone, but you should see it. If not, I can't find it. I was parked up, obviously, in a car park, and then we took the last 3 weeks for the civilian armored vehicle. And again, that was the same thing, but kind of different because you're driving a Range Rover that should be, a third of its weight, but now it's 6 to 7 tons with a V8 or V12 engine. And the highlight of that training, so I don't bore you with the details, is we were on the A1M, probably the main motorway in the country or one of the main ones. And this was, of course, sanctioned by the Humberside Police, North Yorkshire Police, one of the two. But basically, the instructors were speaking to the police at the time. But the road was quiet or fairly quiet. And the key word of the instructor was you need to progress, and that basically means speed the hell up. And on the A1M, we clocked at 150 mile an hour in 6, 7 ton vehicles, about 4 or 5 feet from the car in front and the car behind. So that was all taught of how to do evasive driving. So technically, I've got advanced driving qualifications. Kelly, I may obviously explain that in a later episode, but she's got even more advanced kind of qualifications. So it's non-accredited. So right now, my license, do I know that I can drive slightly better than the rest? No. So it's not like something that will reduce your insurance or give you any kind of brownie points, but it's basically an advanced driving qualification that was internally within the military. You can drive X, Y, and Z vehicle aggressively, non-aggressively, and yeah, that was pretty much it. So we deployed in July. We had a few stop-offs. We first stopped off in Akrotiri, which is Cyprus. We did a 7 or 10 day acclimatization. So we were actually on, it was YouTube, British Forces TV. It's basically like a BBC kind of for the military, but they caught us there because they've got a permanent base. And they caught us there doing the acclimatization. But basically we had to zero our weapons because this is the last opportunity before we land in a war zone, like an active hot war zone. So we zeroed the weapons, we zeroed the thermals, the night imaging. The thermals was particularly hard. I remember this because when you're doing a shoot at say 400 meters, and if you have a look on a hot day, you get like a mirage like this. And when you're trying to hone in your thermals when it's 47 degrees in July, it's not that easy, but it's basically we're doing a lot of runs with body armor, I mean full body armor, and that's just to get the body ready for Afghanistan, because again, it was just as hot, if not sometimes hotter. We stopped off in Qatar, I think it was Qatar, and that was literally kind of a pit stop, and they had to kind of change aeroplanes for something more suited to land in Kabul, potentially, RPGs flying at you or whatever. But we went on a civilian aircraft that was more redesigned for military use, and then we jumped on a C-130, so a Hercules, and yeah, we flew from Qatar into Kabul, where yeah, we landed. And probably the most vivid memory for me in my entire life, when you look outside and you see mountains and you see Afghan people, what you see in the films and the documentaries. So I'm already kind of, it all felt surreal, I'll be completely honest with you. But when you step off that plane, the smell, I cannot ever describe to you the smell. I'm not saying it was smelly, as in a bad smell, but there was a certain smell in the air that at that point, for me, the proverbial penny dropped. So we got off the plane, we drove to camp, and I think 36 hours later, I was on Skype to my parents, and the sirens just started going off everywhere. So our main role in Kabul, it was called force protection. So basically there was a big airport. It was called Kaya Airport. It was a multinational, of course run by Americans, but there was 56 nations in the ISAF, so the international kind of conglomerate of armies. ISAF were HQ there, was an American camp. And leading up to the camp, there was only one road. And guess who was 400 meters, 500 meters down the road, which was us. Our job was to basically, we're policing this road. This road is ours. You know, nobody kind of gets through it. And it was our job in Afghanistan was to basically be glorified taxi drivers with a lot of weapons, of course. If a five-star general came in, we were kind of there in some aspect protecting them. If there was a member of, a member of state, like a prime minister, president, it was our job to be at the front, be at the rear, basically force protection in that kind of element. But the problem is, if you Google Kabul, the good thing is for you, after about 3 years, I have paid a lot of money for this, but I managed to recover my hard disk, my original Afghanistan laptop, which is dead. There's dust, heat, everything. I managed to recover the hard drive, and the reason why that's so important is because on that hard drive, I have got all the images when we were up in helicopters, which I'm going to start dropping all through this video. Unbelievable imagery. Some of the photos you will see are mine. It was taken off. We weren't allowed phones, so it was taken off. Is it an iPod Nano or something? But it was an iPod of some description that had a camera in it. And you'll see which ones are mine, and you'll see the more professional pictures because we had a logistics corps professional photographer with us. Obviously, we had a dedicated dog handler, dedicated medics, and a dedicated photographer. That was his job to capture everything. But what you will see in the images is we were based, imagine London, okay, or any major metropolitan city, and we were in the middle of it. So it wasn't like we were out in the sticks and all you could see around us was desert. We were literally, one of our observation points and our guard points, I was looking into somebody's house, and you'll see this in the images. 360 pretty much, apart from this road that I explained, it was covered by civilian buildings. Every day the kids would be chucking rocks at our towers and mud, and obviously the kids, but yeah, that was our job. The sirens, in fact, that's it. The sirens went off about 36 hours after we landed. So imagine I'm on my little PC, a Windows laptop. I bought a special one at the time, £600. I thought I was Elon Musk at the time. So, there was this laptop that I said, look, if it gets blown up, who cares? Type of thing. It was only 600 quid. It was a lot of money for me, but still, it was much better than like a MacBook or something. So, I've only got one application on the laptop. It was Skype, and that was to specifically speak to my mum and dad. And I'm there lying on my bed, 51 degrees. I've got sweat pouring down, and obviously the number one question, how is it, son? Are you safe? And of course I'm like, yeah, mom, everything's fine. It's a holiday, there's palm trees, all the usual white lies you would tell your parents. And now all of a sudden in the background you hear this just sirens, because we're right next to, imagine Heathrow Airport times 7 in size, and we're right next to it, and all these alarms started going off and these shrieking sirens. And I said, Mom, I'm gonna have to go. I can see people just running everywhere and all this. And later what we found out basically that day, it was, I believe, I'll need to Google it to make sure, you can Google it, but it was probably most likely the highest ranked officer who had just been shot, if not the highest or one of the highest, but basically it was a 2 or 3 star general. So I mean, 7th from the top, whatever that is. It was an American general. He flew in to have a look how we and the Americans were helping to train the Afghan National Army, the Afghan National Police, of course, because that was the transition from us to them. And basically, as you've probably heard on the news so many times, there's been a couple of imposters, these sleeper agents that masqueraded as, say, Afghan National Army, turned around with a gun, shot the general dead on the spot. There was a bit of a firefight. Obviously, that guy is no longer with us. And yeah, that was literally 36 hours. And it was all over the news afterwards. So they like to do a media blackout for, 24, 72 hours, just so that they can inform the family. But it was all over the Sky News, BBC, you know, Fox News in America, all that type of stuff. But yeah, that happened literally as we arrived there. We did 6 months. I did 7 months, 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after. Um, that was because of my driving qualifications. I was one of the first in, so I was ready there with the Foxhound vehicles that I was trained on. And of course, you can't just travel in the taxi in a place like that. So I was ferrying people at the start from the airport to camp in an armored vehicle, and then at the end, as you will see the pictures, I got some awesome pictures there. We were ferrying people back to the airport as we were withdrawing. A few people got injured. One guy actually got blown up. He got blown up in it was actually the civilian armored vehicle in front of us. But this just, it's a testament to how good these vehicles were. It was quite a big bomb. And he hit, obviously, it's under the concrete. He hit it and went boom. Nobody got injured in terms of nobody died and nobody lost their legs. But this one specific guy, is the explosion was so severe that I didn't know this, but within your ears, there's some sort of drum with liquid or whatever. I'm not a doctor, but basically that blew it completely out. It's irreparable. So actually, he can't walk properly because his equilibrium in his ears, what keeps you, steady, is gone. So he's either sometimes in a wheelchair or he's on walking sticks because he basically can't keep upright. I saw probably some of the biggest explosions you could ever see. We were dealing with not Helmand province where Kelly was, where you were dealing with these little IEDs, sometimes the big ones, but over in Kabul, they were actually, rather than putting little tiny ones in trees or underground, they were actually putting them in vehicles in some cases. And at one point, again, this one road, there was a convoy of US troops. They were heading somewhere in the outskirts of another camp. And we literally saw this unfolding in front of our very eyes. But basically, right outside the gate, just past that, that international waters kind of analogy, you can't touch them, but you can touch them, but you can't touch them. So he was just far enough away from the camp to where we had to watch him. You can't impede the local population too much. And basically, this guy had whatever 500 kilos of whatever TNT, C4, homemade ID, whatever it was. And you could just see over there was this convoy, these huge 40 vehicle convoy of American kind of vehicles of some size. And this guy just went bang. I have never in my life heard and felt anything more bone shattering. The shockwave that it smashed the windows. There was a few of that magnitude that happened throughout the 6 months, which I won't touch on. But this specific one, because we were watching it unfold and it just went bang. Once again, of course, that guy is no longer with us. But the vehicle that was hit at the front, it looked like nobody was in there. Basically, I think, I mean, as in nobody would survive. But basically, everything was battered. The vehicle was almost in half. The worst injury from that incident was a broken collarbone. So you've got to give props to whoever builds these vehicles, because a half a ton improvised explosive device hit like that. I'm surprised, if more than anything. But yeah, that was kind of my time. I'm moving on to the next episode with the final story. But basically, before we left for Afghanistan, I have never ever in my life, and I think this is the true beginning of how the brand got started. I never in my life had the opportunity to own any nice car. And I had my first ever car was a Fiat Punto 1.2 liter, absolute monster. It moved nowhere. But I had a Punto, I had a little Renault Megane Coupe. So I had cars like that, basically rust boxes, you know, because that's the best I could afford. My insurance was always too high because, again, I'm a high risk driver. I'm a young, inexperienced male driver. So our insurance kind of had to pay for that. And before we left, of course, I was in training for 6 months. I didn't spend a penny pretty much apart from kind of shaving gel. And I came out of training with a little bit of money. I moved to Northern Ireland and I, I remember ringing my dad. It was my first week in Northern Ireland. I said, Dad, this is amazing. There was like sports courts everywhere. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to kind of love it here, but I just need your advice. Like I want to buy a newish or whatever new car because armed forces had special dealerships that would do them discounts. So I know Vauxhall as a brand do really good kind of dealerships, and I think it was BMW, I think, but one of the German brands, definitely not Mercedes, not Audi. So it'll be BMW, and they did like you could not pay the tax on a car, or or it's deferred somewhere down the line. But that was kind of their way of saying thank you. And I said, look, I want to buy a car. My dad said, look, son, you're going away for 6, 7 months. The car's going to be sat in Northern Ireland, which is always wet. Um, I would probably recommend that you wait until you come back. Looking back on it, probably the best thing or the best 5 minute conversation with any man I've ever had in my life, because I don't think if I had kind of not listened to him and I did what I wanted to do, maybe I wouldn't be able to afford the cars that I had after I came back. So I didn't have, obviously, the car that I wanted. Um, Going back to Afghan, I did my 6.5, 7 month tour. Um, Came back. Now, before I came back, very early on, as I said to you about the car, I started where I could. Of course, Wi-Fi was very limited, but every single opportunity that I had that wasn't speaking to my parents via Skype, I was on good old Auto Trader and I was looking, and I became over, imagine, 7 months, and almost every day for half an hour I was on Auto Trader. Now, half an hour on Auto Trader is a lot. You know, he's just flicking the same cars. Soon enough, I started seeing the same stupid listings because I was on it that much. And I started thinking, right, I was calculating. So I knew how much bonus I was going to get from coming back. Seemed a lot at the time, but now looking back in hindsight, thinking I could have died for this money. But I had a bonus. I wasn't paying for accommodation, which again, pennies, but it accumulated over the weeks. My full salary, my away from camp allowance. So all of this money, I said, right, if I spend 50 to £100 a month on the bare necessities, I mean, toothpaste, maybe a chocolate bar a month just to keep my morale up. But if I spend that maximum and I do nothing else with that money but put it into my account and leave it, I would have, you know, quite a substantial amount of money. So I did a calculation. I like my mathematics. So I did a basic calculation and I said, right, well, I can afford this kind of car maximum, you know, on my pay packet. And I started looking, and I was looking German cars, Italian cars, undisclosed cars, let's say, of just some kind of a non-important brand that are, you know, a run-of-the-mill car. And I just kept going this circle over and over. And then when I started making that circle smaller and smaller, I decided it was going to be German. I decided it was going to be brand new. And I thought, eventually, um, I I nailed it down. It was the car that I had. I eventually, it was a funny story. I actually emailed. It was a Belfast Audi, and I was in communications with them 6 weeks prior. And I said, look, you know, this is what I do. This is where I am. I can't go and do a test drive of the car. You can imagine I'm 5,000 miles away in a war zone. But I really want this car that's on your website. It was a pre-approved kind of new car. It was basically was an X demo that was never driven. It had, I don't know, 50 mile on the clock, black, you know, all these things. And I said, I want this car, but I can't buy it right now. Can you reserve it for me? I gave them whatever it was, £500, £1,000. Like literally, I was doing all this from Afghanistan, and I was talking to them. And then I started looking at YouTube videos of Audi S5s and all these type of things. And I secured the car. I got back, so we did the same trip back. We stopped in Qatar, picked my phone up. I said, Mum, I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm out of the war zone. I got hit with a different type of heat in Qatar, but again, more tears happened. I was safe. Like the air tasted sweeter. I was like, I'm free. Nothing happened. Went to Cyprus. We did what's called decompression, and they put a few comedians on. They give you a couple of tokens for a few alcoholic drinks. I remember I had one can of alcohol in the heat. I I was sick, I didn't drink for 7 months straight. I was at the peak condition of my life. I was dehydrated. I was thin. I was fit. Um, and I had one can of whatever cider beer, and I was on the floor. I was dead. So we were there for a couple of days doing decompression just to make sure nobody's got any mental issues. And then we landed in Northern Ireland, well, Brize Norton, which is the main Air Force base in the UK. Um, Landed in Northern Ireland. Basically, we had half a day as administration. Just make sure they treat you like children. Wash your clothes. Make sure you don't go and do anything stupid. Basically, don't go and do anything stupid. You've just come back from, a kind of an operational tour. You've come back to a civilian population. Please don't think that you're Hercules type of thing. That typical speech. Don't mess up. I went straight to Tesco. I bought 20 bags of Doritos, ate them all that same night. I was off Doritos for like 6 months after that. I had Doritos coming out of my ears. And the very next day, I took a taxi because my trusty Fiat Punto was 7 months in a very wet climate. My alternator dead. My battery they couldn't start it. I literally said, you know what, scrap it. They gave me 50 quid. Like they literally took the car, they dragged it on, everything was seized. I said, take it, 50 quid, bang. I didn't care. Literally, right after the truck left the camp, I went taxi, went to Belfast Audi, and I bought my first nice car. It was an Audi S5. It was in black. And I thought I was literally on top of the world right now. And that's where I lead on to the next episode. Hopefully, I'll see you soon.